Welcome everyone to this new Tech Captains episode. So today we are lucky to have Martin Brunthaler, CTO and co-founder at Adverity, which is a company working on data. So you'll be able to tell us a bit more in a few minutes, which is a very trendy topic. So hi, Martin.
Hello. Hi. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And today I'm accompanied as usual with Gareth Thomas, CTO at Big Data.
Hi everybody. Hi Martin.
Hi.
Good. So Martin, you co-founded the company in 2016. You raised, I don't know, 150, 60 millions. Who keeps counting at this point? You've created several companies out of Austria. So can you tell us a bit more about how you got there?
Yeah. So I think my as you might be able to guess from the color of my beard, I'm in my mid-40s now, so I've been in this field for quite a while already. How I started really is I think with an Amiga computer that was a Commodore, not the really old one C64, but the Amiga variant, which I got I think with around about 10 years. So I started coding on this with BASIC, and I had a little kid book, illustrated BASIC book that I used for programming like little games and stuff like that. So kind of sparked my interest pretty early, and then I started with later on a personal computer with programming Pascal and Delphi. So I did a little bit of database style applications for a friend of mine, and then like in school we had an interesting programming language that we learned that was Comal. I'm not sure if that's still I'm not sure if anyone still knows the kind of language. It's probably a dying one, like COBOL or whatever. But we had good fun programming in that too. And then during university, I made a choice whether I should join a corporation for which I was working as a software programmer, or join a couple of crazy guys from university and join them for the startup. And luckily enough, I made the latter choice. And we've been working in for mobile applications. So we developed web applications. That was a thing at the time. And I moved into the short messaging space, which where we even we built our own data center, and even purchased the diesel ones that we put onto the roof to have uninterrupted power supply in case of failure. Because at that time, the companies purchasing such software were obviously telcos with they had interest in like keeping stuff up and running quite a bit. We have been lucky enough to be able to sell this company in 2006 to an American corporation, and then we stuck around for a while. So we, and myself as well, have been able to learn a little bit the corporate environment as well during the time. And after 2 years, I started something else again, like in the price comparison space.
Was that your browser plugin?
Yeah, exactly. It used to be a browser
plugin.
I tried.
It's pretty cool, that actually. Yeah.
It's that's 10 years ago, maybe 12 even. A little
That's
bit
a lifetime in tech world.
It's a lifetime, I can say that. And actually, what is more interesting is not the plugin side of things; it's the backend, really, because you do real-time price comparison with a lot of partners in the backend. So there's several like fees that you can use for the purpose, and also the matching exercise is kind of challenging. So, today you could it do or run it a little bit differently, maybe, but at that time it was certainly something interesting to do.
Why did you stop it?
Pardon?
Why did you stop building that?
No, it didn't stop. I think it's still around. It's been sold also to a price comparison company here in Austria. And so I think the team is still working on that, even though their priorities might have shifted to other areas as well.
I see.
I think these days it's more difficult. There was a very hot time in the browser extension ecosystem where you had to be, especially in Firefox add-on store, if you've been ranked high, you could easily acquire a lot of traffic at that time. I think it's harder today than it used to be 15 years ago. And then you also have Chrome becoming more of an important browser at that point in time, and Chrome add-on store. So a lot of companies use that opportunity to, create a lot of traffic and good ranking in add-on stores to acquire customers. I think it's a lot harder today. Right, then after that, we started Adverity. We really bootstrapped that within another company. And 8 years later, we are 350 people.
You must wake up. Yeah, you must wake up someday and be like, "Who are all these people? Why do they trust me?"
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's the interesting part is when you're like when you run it, like when you're in the daily operations of this, you don't recognize it that way. It's like it's something that happens over time, and you grow with that. But from the outside, it's amazing, yeah.
And could you maybe in a few sentences explain what is Adverity? Because there's so many data products you see on the market, and I know, like, look, I've looked at your LinkedIn quickly, obviously, also, and like you say intelligent marketing analytics platform, but what does that mean concretely? Like, what do you do?
Yeah, I think so. At the core, we make it easy to work with data for data teams, really. So our core, really at the core, what we do is we allow people to focus on the business application that they build. And for many people, that might be building a dashboard, like when you're on the marketing side of things, but it might also be building a data application that, where you run the machine learning model on top of that, and make marketing decisions to run a campaign, stop, start, etc. We really started off, when we started the company, our main challenge was to replace an existing workflow that mainly consisted of throwing a couple of data points together into a spreadsheet, and then create a PowerPoint presentation out of that to automate the whole workflow. So we started off with a dashboarding or exploration and dashboarding capability, and added data integration on top of that, or like as a foundation to that. And over time, we evolved into much more than that, because the visualization, like the data product that you build on top of that, might only require the foundation, and you have other tools that on top of that. Say, for example, Looker Studio or Power BI, Tableau, you name it. Like there's many tools that can run where you can create visualization and dashboards.
Yeah,
we really make it easy to use the kind of underlying data set. And when I look at the marketing ecosystem, there's lots of sources. We support more than 600. And it's constantly evolving. Like things, say, for example, like Snapchat or TikTok, they haven't been around 4 years ago.
So would you say you are more into the data processing like Google BigQuery and Athena, or you more into the data consumption like QuickSight, Data Studio, Looker, etc.?
I think it's a mix. We are strong on the data integration side of things, I'd say, from a proposition perspective. And just today, we are about to. That's a coincidence, but with the first customers currently getting a new release, where we are going one step further in the value proposition. So with the upcoming versions that we're gonna release to our customers, you also get a native programmatic interface to our data storage. So this really removes the need to operate your own data warehouse, and you can really focus on building what you build on top of that.
So do you mean a command line interface? Is that what you're talking about, like a CLI?
You might want to use it for a CLI, but also through, say, for example, an ODBC driver. Such you can look into our platform through a programmatic interface, rather than providing your own SQL database or data warehouse. Yeah.
So is Adverity really the ETL basically of the extract, transform, load of the process?
Yeah, you could say that. ETL, ELT, you can run it in both modes of operation if you like. So we allow you to apply transformations before it lands in the storage and also after. So you can do both.
Well, actually, it was interesting to me because I was reading the case studies. You got a ton of case studies on your website, and I thought it was quite amazing that you seem to have a very wide breadth of functionality. So you've got things from sort of low-level ETL where you're providing data, you're doing that sort of stuff, but then you've also got, I'm guessing, dashboards and abstraction layers for marketers. So I mean, that's quite a wide breadth for your tool, right?
It is, yeah. Initially, we started with the whole presentation capability. That is what you now see with dashboarding and exploration. then, like I said, the data integration part became like its own business, so to say. It started off as an internal tool such that we could onboard sources for our customers, but it got very strong very quickly. And I think what distinguishes us in this area is also the depth that we go into supporting a source. It's not like you can select a couple of metrics. We always like go into like what is supported from the customer and try to make it as flexible as possible. And then
I was going to ask you that question about what did you build first, and why did you choose to build it? I guess. But where do you think your strength is now? If you kind of look at the sort of width of the, where do you sort of say you're best at?
Clearly, data integration is where we shine. But I think and that's kind of when you look out into the future, maybe 2-3 years, a lot depends on the application that you build on top of that. So a data application might be a dashboard for many companies at the moment. But I think especially the last 6 months showed us that it might be something completely different moving forward. I think, dashboards always had its use for a while and will certainly still have its use. But as we move into a world that is where GPT-like technology, specifically saying like technology, there's lots of stuff out there. It could be a replacement for that. And like one of the main factors that always drove me was like, I don't want to have people build dashboards, because it's the current state of things, but it's a lot of waste of time that goes into that. So I would really like to eliminate that. And even though if you end up with a widget showing you a graph, it might be useful for interpreting something that's happening in your marketing spend. Just having a couple of eyeballs watching the dashboard is not always producing the right result.
Yeah, and I think you're right about the time spent, and it's not just the time spent when you initially build a dashboard. My experience of them is they change all the time, right? You get a new strategic direction, you get a new whatever, and all of a sudden the dashboard you built, and now want a different dashboard, and it just never ends, really.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what is your tech stack to build all of that and all those data connector?
So I'd say we run mostly on Python. That's where we started with data integration. However, we have a very diverse tech stack. The front end is mostly built on TypeScript, React, now Next.js technology. So I think it's pretty modern in these regards. Then we have a part of the platform that still runs on Groovy and Rails.
Wow.
That's something that we still have around. A little bit of Kotlin, but that's kind of the majority at the moment. I'd say 60% is built on Python.
And you mentioned now a few of these modern frameworks, Next.js, etc. But also earlier, just after you mentioned the Greybeard, all the languages like Pascal, etc. that you used to work with. And nowadays, we don't really hear those. So what do you think of younger developers or people getting into the tech world and directly jumping into frameworks? What's your opinion on that?
I think it's hard. Language is not as important as the kind of ecosystem that surrounds it. Hence, Python is very strong because you have a couple of key leader technologies, for example, Django, maybe Celery to be considered as well. We have strong support from companies like Google, who provide native SDKs, etc. So I think what really powers a language, if you would want to say that, is the whole ecosystem and frameworks that you can get and the support from the community. That said, there's always the coolest kid around. 2 years ago, nobody was talking about TypeScript, and now it's the hottest thing in the JavaScript ecosystem. It could be considered its own language as well, but what I mean here is things change, and I think the key takeaway is we should embrace that, because even considering things like GPT, 9 months ago, not many people have been talking about that, and now it's the hottest thing around. And keep an open mind. That's kind of the thing.
Now you wrote, and just talking about Adverity, I saw a blog I think you wrote on your website I think the title was "What is the Modern Data Stack?" And you talk about some of the current challenges with vertical data integration, unified base layers. And what do you think the issue is with things like that? Is it naming standards? Is it poor metadata? What do you think sort of underlies those problems?
I think there's maybe two themes to that. So I personally think that, and you can have different buying or user personas for your stack, so to say. But I think the main issue is that in many corporations, the kind of three main disciplines sit in different organizations, and as such, you end up with many people owning parts of the stack, and that kind of will yield or cause many failures along the way. Say, for example, if the developer / engineering organization owns the data integration part, and the developer decides to drop something because it doesn't interest anyone anymore, and then the consuming side, which might be a Power BI user, it goes missing. Like it falls apart quite quickly. For such cases, I strongly think that an integrated solution provides more stability. And as we move into things like data containers and contracts, it's a kind of a mixed feeling around the kind of term, because many people interpret it differently. But I think we need to move into an ecosystem where we have like requirements that go down into the source, and things don't break that easily. That's kind of, I think, the main issue really. And then like having 3-4 tools compose your stack might be flexible for some organizations, but very complex to maintain.
And do you think there are, I mean, you've mentioned ChatGPT a few times. Do you think there are AI solutions in these spaces to be looked at?
So it's an interesting, so I monitor that quite closely. There's a couple of things that are happening that interest me. However, I think at the moment we are thinking about how to augment our existing technology with, GPT-like things, and a lot might deal with user interface facing capabilities. Say, for example, making it easier to compose a data transformation, or maybe even compose, an API interface. There you have the matter of how much you trust it and how much data is correct that you retrieve from a source, but you can address those kind of issues. But what I still haven't got my head around, like, what's going to be the future when you look at it 2 years down the road, because there's already some stuff happening, and you might end up in an ecosystem where you don't really need that much of a pipelining capability. It might be something completely different. Then there's companies composing SQL queries, for example, which is also a discipline that kind of is on the user experience / feature side of things. So let's see. I think it's very interesting times at the moment.
So you think, from the point of view of your company, you're looking at maybe utilizing it more in the sort of vein of of Copilot, right, where it kind of help people understand how to talk to your platform or get the data in the best way out of your platform.
Yeah, so that's certainly something that we look at the moment. So how we can apply those technologies to the existing stack, but also how we can make it utilize that moving forward. As in like modern 2.0, whatever you call that.
Yeah.
And Martin, so you created a company like 7 years ago now, and you mentioned more than 800 people.
Yeah, 300.
So like, you must have had
800 would really be scary now. No, 300.
300, sorry, 300. But it's still very impressive. Like you must have had so many like challenges, like both human and technical challenges. Like what were your the top few challenges you have encountered? Also, your role has evolved a lot and shifted based on that.
I'm not sure what to pick. Like, but then again, like I said initially, if it's happening on a daily basis, it's not like, you just keep on pushing. I think that's the mode of operation. There's phases where you can do more strategic stuff, and then there's phases where it's more like making sure that everyone's aligned. Like, alignment plays a huge role in a big organization. I think it's a good challenge to like make sure that everybody's pulling on the same like rope. I think that's something that myself and Alex are working on a daily basis. For me personally, I think comms is always an issue. being out there and being public is something that I should do more often. And but when you are fighting fires, it's something that you need to work on.
Isn't it funny how every company from the outside can look super successful, but when you're in the inside, like there's holes everywhere in the boat,
Yeah, totally second that. I think everyone
always. Yeah. If you read stories about PayPal, a lot of these massively successful businesses in their early days, it's craziness,
Yeah.
People have no idea. It's kind of like the swan. They just think it's serenely moving across the lake. Meanwhile, it's just madness underneath. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the part of that.
We have a small tradition in the podcast that every guest presents a book that they really like, and you mentioned design patterns, elements of reusable object-oriented software, if I'm correct. Like why this book?
I think the book is it's a classic, and everybody would say that, but I think I got it in the 90s when I was still like 14, 15 years old. Would have to look that up, but it kind of it was my first connection with structured, like how you get structure into your thinking in terms of how you architect and design code. And I think most of that still is valid today, even though pragmatic languages change, and like we already talked about frameworks, that all changes, but the design patterns underneath are good to know. And the same applies for algorithms, which still is a very good book to read on if you want to understand underlying how stuff works really. When you read that early, I think it's a good read to have.
I would actually argue that it's in some ways maybe to be honest with you, I've not read that book, so I shall read it now. But it sounds like it might even be more valid, because it just seems that today it's so easy just to go and pick code off the internet and plug it in somewhere without fundamentally understanding what you're trying to build. I mean, I remember when I was coding, when I started out as a programmer, I used to spend a lot of time thinking about how I was going to structure what I was writing before I wrote any code. But I think nowadays, because it's so easy to just go pull things from various places and just bolt them together, that probably happens less so. I don't know.
Yeah, so true. Yeah. No, totally true. I exactly the point. That is very good.
Gareth, any more questions for Martin?
I actually had two more questions. So one, just going back to your blog, I think you said at the end, you made a comment about the fundamentals of good data practice, and I was wondering what you would regard those as being.
It's a good question. It's been a while, I think, since I did that, but I think the fundamentals are really around whether you can, and that goes back into also a couple of features that we're building out, but a lot is in terms of how much you can trust the source. If you trust the quality in your data stack, you don't have to go back to the source and verify. And that's one of the hardest challenges, I think, for any platform out there, is like really making sure the user has confidence in the correctness and the up-to-dateness or freshness of the data in your platform. I think that's a recurring theme for many companies in this area anyway, but I think that's a really, really critical thing to get right.
And the other one I want to ask you was sort of going back, I guess, to the earlier part of your career, because you were in telecoms, right? You did quite a bit, but you mentioned at the beginning. Mm-hmm. And then I was wondering what you think about 5G and 6G. So to me, I just think 5G, it just seems like it hasn't really delivered what it promised. I mean, they talked about low latency, and I think there was a Chinese surgeon that did a live surgery, but then what's happened since, really? So I was...
Yeah, I think it's hard, like, to get the infrastructure right. And, I have to say, I started early 2000s, and I majored in telecommunication sciences. So a lot of that is pretty outdated at the moment, I'd say, because my focus shifted a lot towards the software side of things, but which is now coming back, I think, with 5G as well. When you look at the equipment, it's a lot more software driven than it used to be with previous generations. How it cannot deliver, I think a lot depends on density. So at least here in Vienna, we have a pretty good coverage, but still, it's not where it should be. And when you look at latency, it didn't fulfill the promise. I can second that. But on the other end, I think at least here it works quite well.
Well, it was interesting too, because I looked at that and then I looked at 6G, and they're saying there was some lab in China where they got 206 gigabits per second data rate on the frequency baseband they're going to have for 6G. So 6G is promising. This is the one where we're going to give you, 10x more capacity, so bringing the cloud closer to your devices and all that kind of stuff.
That's a good promise, but the use, I think, if you look at it from the outside, you need to find the use case for that too. And there's certainly something out there you can figure out. But I suppose latency is the one, like you already mentioned, that really matters for them. It's kind of experience, I think, bandwidth. And then again, it's a shared medium. A lot depends on how many people are adopting the kind of technology. So it's good to have the bandwidth in reserve. But at the moment, other things matter more.
And I think to finally, just to say, it just made me laugh yesterday because I saw there's a new dating app, and it's basically dating mixed with TikTok. So I'm thinking we're going to have even more videos being recorded on. So we're going to need all this extra bandwidth, aren't we? Really,
Sure. I'm too old for TikTok, I have to say.
Yeah, it's not for me either. But...
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Martin, for your time, for talking to us and sharing a few insights of your career. I'm sure there's much more. We need to invite you, and we will follow your adventures with Adverity.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. Good luck with Adverity.
Thank you. Have a nice day.